When in England.
Morning, everyone. Good morning, Karen, and morning, Jim. Jim, where are you today?
I'm in London. We're making our way to Mayfair to Hyde Park, actually. And we're going to see Coldplay tonight at Wembley Stadium up at the Concourse private box.
That will be amazing.
Very good.
Beautiful down here. I tell you what, it's really, really quiet down here. There's literally no one up.
It looks like it anyway. If you could bring some of that sun back up here, because we've got rain.
Yeah.
Oh, it's glorious. Got my shorts on and a t-shirt. It's going to be boiling all day.
Well, I walked the dog in the rain this morning, so enjoy it. Okay, right. So speaking of dogs, today's topic is parents and PAWS. And this is a bit of a landlord guide to obviously renting to tenants that have got children and have got pets. Now, you both know, and I know myself, that I think not so much children, but pets is always a bit of a sticky subject when renting your property. So there's quite a lot to I think there'll be a lot of people that will have a lot of input today. So please jump in the comments, tell us what your thoughts are if you're a landlord, what your take on pets and even children, although I think that's a bit a taboo subject to say no children, I think, but anyway, that's my opinion. And also, if you're a landlord or even a tenant, then please jump in the comments and be interactive with us on this subject because it's quite good. So, to kick us off, now, never work with children and animals. It has been like a showbiz term since like way back in the 1930s. Jim, you'll remember that. But many landlords also live by... Many landlords do still live by that advice. So that needs to kind of change, and it's going to change anyway. So landlords are 3 times more likely than agents to refuse tenants that have got children or have got pets, but they're less likely than agents to deduct the costs from the repairs from the security deposit at the end.
Why do you think that is? That's quite a startling statement, isn't it?
Yeah, and well, I mean, that's really down to, I think, avoiding conflict with the tenant at the end. And that's what because that's what we're trained to do, and that's what we do as part and package of the whole management service. Karen, you've worked in property management and dealing with deposits. I mean, tell us a wee bit about dealing with the deposits when it comes to maybe a pet damage claim.
Yeah, so ultimately, if there's damage there, whether it's caused by a child or by a pet, we are trying to get the property back to the condition that the tenant got it in. So if that damage wasn't there in the first place, we're not expecting it to be there when they give the property back. Obviously, we allow for wear and tear, especially if people have children, things are going to happen. You're going to have some scuffs to the walls, etc. But it's obviously minimising that damage. So as an agent, we are looking for the black and white and the facts. It wasn't like that at the start of the tenancy. Wasn't like that, is like that now, taken into wear and tear, whereas some, I think, private landlords might want to avoid that kind of, we'll say, conflict side of it as well. So I think it's just taken into each case and taking it as it goes. But yeah, I can see how there'd be a bit of a difference in them.
Yeah, I mean, each individual case is different, Kim. Do you feel like it's safe deposit? Do you think that's made it a lot easier? Or the deposit scheme?
I think it used to. Safe Deposit Scotland seems to be going through a bit of a change just now. It's making it a bit more challenging for both tenants, agents, landlords. The whole process is a bit more challenging and prolonged, I'll say. So,
do you think that's down to the fact that you get new people joining Safe Deposit Scotland on their board, and then they obviously have to put their stamp on and have a different perspective as well on how things are viewed? Because everybody has an opinion, and that's really what it's based on.
It is, yeah. And I think obviously they're trying to kind of go with the times and make sure they're as up to date with the procedure as possible. But the reality is, in my opinion anyway, it's not working. And the old way that we used to do it, it was quite prolonged anyway before, but we knew what the time scale was. It was always a set time scale that we were working to for both tenants and agents. But now it just seems to have... Well, I mean, speaking to tenants, they're like, I've not heard anything back. And it's like, well, that's Safe Deposit Scotland. Like, we've done everything we can. You've done everything you can. It's down in their hands now. So, it can be quite tricky. So managing a tenancy throughout to avoid any deposit claims, I think at the end of the tenancy is ideally the way that you want to go, because you don't want to be in this process, whether you're a tenant, an agent, or a landlord. If it's avoidable, then that's the best way to go through it, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it is actually quite frustrating, isn't it, how it takes so long? Because tenants will often then turn round and blame the agent or the landlord. And the landlord will just go, look, it's no us. And some will be sceptical to think, is this just pulling a fast one? But it's a bit unfair. I mean, majority of letting agents, majority of landlords, they all make sure everything's recovered and returned properly. And we're obviously having to take this hit of extra bureaucracy for the people that actually don't play by the rules.
Yeah. I mean, I think, in your opinion, Karen, when it comes to the deposit scheme, it's why fix something that's not broken? But they have made the changes, and obviously we'll just have to adhere to that. Anyway, but interestingly enough, multiple surveys of landlords have revealed how properly vetted families and pet owners are equally as good, if not even better, than any other tenants, and they come with the added incentive of, to stay longer to avoid disrupting maybe their children's lives or their pets' lives. I mean, some people's pets are their children, or they consider them that, obviously. And obviously, in the light of the government's proposal to remove the blanket bans on families or any rules around families and pets, we're going to speak today about, obviously, ways to minimise the risk and maximise the benefits of this growing, stable market. And I mean, Karen, you'll be all too aware, and Jim, you as well, but obviously we do a lot in the forefront of lettings now, but I think pets predominantly are so important, and they're such a big part of the tenants that are looking at the moment. So I think it's silly to exclude them, because you really narrow the market right down when you're searching for the right tenant. And we've got so many good tenants that have pets and they look after the property.
Yeah, well, it's never something we've ever done, and I've always said it would never ever advertise about no pets. That's something that's a big no-no for us, and it has been for me from the very beginning, 30 years ago. Because you don't know who's coming along and what circumstances they're in. I think it's down to if we'll look after the property more than anything, and it's really got nothing to do with if they've got pets or not.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always down to the owner as opposed to the pet.
I think we've had some cases where, obviously, like if, for example, it's a landlord's property, maybe they're going to be going back into it later on and they've been allergic to pets. So we've had to kind of have like the odd no pets, but
Yes.
at the same time, it is taking it on an individual basis. And when we do come across a landlord that has no pets at that initial kind of valuation side that we do, it's trying to kind of explain to them, look, you are really restricting your market. If you don't include pets, you could have somebody that maybe has like a little cat or a little dog, and they could be the perfect tenant, and you would lose everyone because you don't take on that pet. I mean, we're all pet people. We all have our pets and love our animals, and I've seen so many people that have actually looked, it's actually kids that cause more damage than pets. So I do think it is silly to exclude pets just in general.
Well, I can't argue that principle, can I? Because I've got 9 cats.
I was going to say, how many have you got now?
9. Amber's returned home after 6 weeks on her sabbatical. But you can't. I mean, you can't. I mean, it's not fair. I mean, to some people, their pets are their children. It's like what you said, Richard. I mean, you included. You've got Dexter.
Yeah.
You know, Dexter's like your bairn. It's like, and to say to someone, "I'm sorry, you can't do that." Often as well, I thought it was quite interesting. And you will go on to talk about yourselves. But I thought, actually, people actually make more damage than pets do. So does that mean we should exclude people then?
That would be a problem for the market, I think.
But it's true though. It's when you look at it in the context of that, then you've got to look at it and take a broad brush approach and say, look, we can't exclude anyone here, really. It's just about who's the best person for the property.
Yeah, and I think that all comes back to the agent or the landlord doing the proper checks and going through the proper procedure at the beginning. And that is one of the most important parts of the whole procedure. And I explain that to potentially new landlords and things as well. The key thing is to find the right person and do the right things at the beginning of the tenancy, because that will lay the groundwork for a really successful and potentially long-term tenancy, which is ultimately what you want.
Well, look at the classic example, we had before, in London Lights, where the owner had a property next door and they bought it so they can control who lives next door because they wanted peace and quiet and enjoyment.
Yeah.
And then we came along and we said, look, we've got a tenant for this. We know they're going to be ideal. They do have a dog. And we went, no. And I says, look, I think you should meet this person. I think you should meet the dog. And she's had these people as tenants for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And yet at the time she just went, no, blanket, no. And then she's fantastic with them.
Yeah.
And it suited perfectly for her. So it's probably the best story ever to say that you shouldn't preclude people just because of that.
Yeah, definitely. I would 100% agree with that. And I think, like you just mentioned and touched on there, Jim, about meeting the pet and getting a wee bit more background on the pet, and we'll talk about that a wee bit later as well, because that's an important point when you're doing the whole referencing and background checks on tenants that have got pets. But I'm going to do a quick couple of good mornings. Good morning, Charlotte. Thanks for joining us. Morning, Perry. Good. You are here as well. So remember, guys, any questions, anything you want to ask, if you've had your own experience with renting and pets and children, and whether that's you're a tenant or a landlord, please jump in the comments. But as I was just explaining, it's really about understanding the market, I think, as well. If you're an agent and you're working on behalf of a landlord, or if you're a landlord and doing this on your own, then you really need to understand the market for tenants and children, for children and pets. So there are various studies that contain valuable facts and figures about families and pet owners that have been pulled together, and there's some interesting points in here. Now, I think the first one for me, which I don't think will be a surprise to a lot of people, is 50% of the UK's population own a pet. Yet only 7% of landlords advertise their homes as pet friendly. Now, that isn't surprising to me. I mean, is that surprising to you guys?
No, to be honest, I thought that would have been higher than 50%, to be honest. But
I thought we'd do higher than 50% as well. I think the 7% advertises the properties as pet friendly. They're losing a potential market.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, I had a story one time where somebody phoned me up and said, "Do you accept pets?" And I went, "Of course we do. You know, it just depends on the circumstances."
Mm-hmm.
And I went, "Well, I've got a goldfish." I went, "Right, okay." And then I thought to myself, wow, how many people are actually getting excluded because they think their guinea pig or their goldfish wouldn't be allowed? And yet and folk would think that's just normal run of the mill, that's fine. Mm-hmm. I mean, when people think about pets, they immediately think about things like cats and dogs, don't they?
Cats and dogs predominantly, yeah.
So 50% is actually quite startling. 7%, I think it's fear. It drives that. A lot less people want to say pet friendly just in case. They're almost, in their mind, they're maybe thinking they're opening the door to say any pet's okay.
Yeah.
And then they have that fear factor for all the horror stories they've heard before. All that, you know, all these things that they hear, all the horror stories, and that's all people remember, but they don't remember all the great times in the majority of cases where people have pets and they've left the property and it's been perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I like you say the horror stories, a couple that I've had, and it's funny, Jim, I think of you, and it's like, oh, my tenant had about 7 cats and left the place in a total. But it's like, well, how many cats did you say you've got, Jim? 8, 9?
9.
And well, your house isn't like that, so
no.
Have
you make sure you make sure you've got the cats. I mean, admittedly here, I'm not prescribing to somebody on a 2-bedroom flat to have 9 cats. You know, we've got a big, huge amount of property. It's next door to a huge expansive area, which is like the countryside for them. Yeah. So they can go out and they're out most of the day anyway. And they've got their own room. They've taken over my cinema room. So they've got their own room, and they've all got their own spaces in the house because we've got a big house. Mm-hmm. So they all have their own places. So they're not on top of each other all the time. And they're all neutered and spayed as well, yeah, to make sure that that's, you know, they're all defleed. You know, they've got flea treatments, they've got worm treatments, everything. They're all perfectly looked after. It's probably cleaner than the boys, to be honest.
I think that's the key that you're touching on there, Jim, though, is making sure that you have the right property for the pets that you're having at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say, look, I'm in a 1-bedroom flat, I've got 3 dogs. It's like, oh my God. You know, that could be an issue.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that all the things that you just went through are demonstrations of a responsible pet owner, and that's what you need to be if you're wanting to have a tenancy that's going to include your pet. So, you all right, Jim?
In a construction zone.
No, I'm crossing the road here. So I'm looking to make sure I don't get run down. That's all.
Did I get run off live?
Some guy's gun ho. This guy here's gun ho. He's ready to go.
I didn't get knocked down live on camera. Mind you, it might get our views up.
Anything to get the ratings up.
Right, okay. But yeah, back to some of the facts for these studies. So in 2017 to 2018, 35% of households in the private sector included dependent children. Now, I thought that would have been higher, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Especially when I know the amount of properties we let to people that have got dependent children. And Jim, I know you've obviously done it for a lot of years and helped a lot of people in situations that have got dependent children who were struggling for housing and things. And I really think that might change an area. I think and be higher and lower in level.
Remember, dependent children is defined as somebody that's relying on their parents to actually keep them. So we do have families that have got the kids are at their work now, or they're no longer dependents. They're no longer classed under that category. Yeah. So that's just why dependence is probably that percentage.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. If you think as well though, when you go to large concentrated areas like London and Edinburgh, that's taking that statistic into account as well. Yeah. Most of these people are professionals that are living in one-bedroom apartments, studio apartments, HMOs, so that's going to skew that figure a bit. Whereas Fife will be a bit more, probably a bit higher than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that'll differ quite vastly in areas. Like you say, you're in London just now, it'll be totally different in London than it is to here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did think that would be slightly higher, but like you say, it's spread across the country, these figures. Another one, which I think probably seems quite accurate to me, is 50% of new babies in 2019 were born into rented accommodation. That's
a high number. When I saw that, I thought, wow, that is a big number. That is, but then that's going along lines of generation rent, isn't it?
Yes.
And the fact that people don't see, there used to be a stigma attached with renting your own property. Used to be looked at in a different way. Used to be judged in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's no longer happening. It's acceptable now, and it's a normal practice for people. It allows them the flexibility. If you're living short term in an area, the last thing you want to do is probably buy, because the cost to acquire and the cost to exit are prohibitive in terms of short term renting. It's more economic to do that.
Yeah, I feel like that figure directly demonstrates the amount of young couples and things that are in rented property, and obviously then having children and things and starting a family. And this one kind of ties in, and Kieran, you and I spoke about this before we come on, and I just checked what year Kieran was born, because it's a third of millennials are predicted to remain as tenants for the whole of their lives, which I think is quite surprising. Now, I was going to say, Kieran, millennials will be you and I, but Kieran, you just missed that. You're not a millennial.
I'm too young.
You're Generation Z. So
this is quite interesting, because when you think about the logic of this, a third of millennials, right? So if millennials finally, and all the rest of them, generation baby boomers are all gone and everything like that,
yeah.
Millennials are the last ones left. If a third's renting, we only have about 20% of UK housing stock actually in the rented sector. So that causes a problem then, because if that's the global population, then a third of these people would be renting. Therefore, we're short on 10% housing stock for rent.
Yeah, because the millennials, for those who don't know, millennials are 1981 till 1995. Karen, you just missed that at 1996. So, I mean, that's that. Like you said, Jim, once time moves on, and if a third of these people are going to be in rented accommodation, then you're totally right.
This is why the government has to get round to a good social housing policy and actually start building council housing again. That's essential in terms of our economy, in terms of our infrastructure as well, and improvements.
Yeah, definitely. Also in this list, parents with children tend to be older, have better paid, steadier jobs, and want a long-term home for their family, which is what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of that just now, obviously long-term tenancies or longer-term tenancies. And research by the National Landlords Association suggests homes rented to families are less time-consuming to manage. And Karen, we see that, and I mean, give me your input on that, but we let to a lot of families, and we tend to find that there's less hassle, and they just tick along and they get on with it. Do you find that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of families that are in our rented properties, so I would agree that they do tend to stay longer. They don't want to like uproot their children. Likewise with pets as well. Like they want to make that a stable home for them. So they do tend to just kind of, they know what they're doing, and as well, this job has made me realise how. Oh, we're saying goodbye to Jim.
I'm away now, guys. We're going to go into a cafe. It's a nice wee
That's
secret
fine.
garden
Okay.
cafe here.
Enjoy.
Absolutely beautiful.
Enjoy
I'm good.
Coldplay.
Oh, trust me, I'll enjoy it down here. The sun is shining. We're in our shorts and t-shirt, and it's about 23 degrees already. Bye-bye for now.
Right, okay,
Bye.
bye, Jim.
I'm so jealous
Yeah.
of his son.
Sorry, you were saying about families, Kim.
Yeah, so obviously we tend to find as well that they stay in the properties a lot longer. I think as well when they've had children, they've had to adapt to having a bit more life experience, so they're a bit more kind of self-sufficient. We've had some tenants, and it amazes me the things that they come out with, and I'm like, how do you not know how to change a light bulb, or just the simple things as well? So, like I say, when you have kids, you've had to adapt a bit more as well and become that more kind of independence because you have this other human to look after. So, yeah, I would say that they're kind of a bit more kind of self-sufficient and being able to, their tendencies just tend to run a wee bit smoother, I think.
Yeah, I mean, tenants with children and pets, I mean, it's abundantly clear that this part of the market, the rental market, is here to stay. And it's only going to get bigger, I think. And that's not just my opinion. I think that's obviously this is part of these studies and it's noted in here. But I think with that in mind, it's important to plan for family tenants, I think, if that's going to be your target audience. And while the makeup of every whole household is different, modern family life has some fairly universal requirements. By meeting them, your buy-to-let will take them all in its stride. So what kind of things then, Karen? Let's think about what does the modern family look for?
So some of the key things that we find that people look for when they're moving in with their family, for a start, is parking.
Yeah.
You do not want to be having to lug buggies and shopping across the street for on-street parking. You want ideally a driveway, minimal space for one car, but preferably two. Quite a lot of households now have two cars between them, so ideally a two-car parking driveway. Likewise for appliances as well, full-size appliances in the kitchen, for example, like a fridge, freezer, dishwasher. Does tend to be a wee bit of a luxury in some rentals, but if they have it, it's obviously a good silver lining for it because you don't want to be doing dishes. I certainly don't anyway, and I don't even have kids. So I think having kids, you've got your hands full enough. So having a dishwasher is a great point to have if you have a family home that you're renting out.
Yeah.
A nice little extra. Likewise, large capacity washing machines and a powerful oven, hob and extractor fan as well. You don't want any of those smells going through the house, so a good extractor is key as well.
Yeah, I think if you're going to have that family home and your target audience is like you say, the modern family, then to have that multi-purpose functioning kitchen with all these appliances and they don't have to be overly expensive as long as they're decent mid-range appliances that will make family life easier is definitely a plus. Obviously, if you've got appliances and things in place, you are responsible for their upkeep and things. So just keep that in mind. But it definitely will attract the family unit.
Likewise with outdoor space as well. Obviously, if you have a family, you're going to want that garden space. So a nice cut back garden, nice lawn all cut back, and a sturdy, secure fence. We've had, doing so many viewings, I've had tenants that haven't taken properties just because the garden's not enclosed. So it's even just having that thing for whether it's children or pets, having an enclosed garden is a big tick for people. It's that secure space that they can have in addition to the property, that they don't have to, they could just let their kids out to play and they know that they're safe. So having that enclosed garden is a real bonus point for them as well. Quite a lot of properties in the area do have that, but obviously there are the odd one that maybe doesn't or has a shared garden. So having their own space that is enclosed is a very good tick when they're looking for properties.
Yeah, it's such a big plus point. And we've seen it just obviously with lockdown and people enjoying outside space and things. Gardens, even more so, have become so important. But I think definitely for the family units and for people who have got pets, a good sized garden, some outside lawn space, and definitely enclosed. I mean, it's good to have any kind of outside space, but with a lot of people in one property, or like you say, if there's animals and things there, you need that outside space for not just to enjoy it, but just for the extra space. I mean, people are living outside in the gardens a lot more. Karen, I know you're in the midst. I mean, you don't have kids, but you're in the midst of digging yours up at the
We'll
moment.
not talk about my garden.
But how
Very
important is
stressful. Garden has been more stressful than the actual house itself, and it's been ages. But we'll get there, and it'll be lovely when it's done. So I am very much looking forward to having that space. But even just having that one section that's done just now has been really good over summer, because it's been able to go out and just sit out there and enjoy it. And I have a friend that doesn't have a garden. Well, she does, but it's shared, so she doesn't really like to go and sit in it. So she would rather come up and sit in my construction site than in her own bit of shared garden. So it's been good. So you can see it even for that, just for even having like a friend over, for having that extra space outside to enjoy the sun when we get it. I know in Scotland, obviously, our weather's a bit patchy. So whenever the sun comes out, I think everybody does. So it's good having that space to be able to go and enjoy the sun.
Yeah, but we're hard enough. We'll still be in our gardens till late September, October, I think at least. But yeah,
As long as it's not raining, we'll be out.
yeah, your garden's obviously important, and mine's is to me as well. I know the importance of just being able to open the back door, let the dog out, go out and sit and things. So everybody's the same. So you need to take that into consideration, definitely. Washable paint and durable fittings and handles and locks and doorknobs, taps. I mean, toilet seats is the big one. We've been through all this before in previous shows, but the importance of all these small aspects of the property being finished properly, being secured properly, being in good working order and fit for purpose. I mean, how important is that, Karen?
These are all the things that will add up to wear and tear at the end of a tenancy if they are not done in a good enough condition in the first place. You don't want like broken things, toilet seats, like you say, that it's amazing the amount that end up broken or needing replaced. And the fancier toilets that we have, the more expensive the toilet seats are to replace. So having a good quality one in the first place can save it being an issue further down the line during the tenancy.
Yeah. Also, good quality flooring, especially if you've got children and pets, that's going to be hard wearing, especially in like quite high traffic areas like the hallway and stairs and things as well. And the tiles in your bathroom and your kitchen and things that are going to withstand maybe little accidents and continual, obviously, use. I think more and more we see like wet walls tends to be quite a good choice, as opposed it is a little bit more expensive, but it looks nice, it's easily maintained, and I mean tiles could crack and things as well. And like, I mean, if you get good quality tiles, they won't crack easy. But I mean, if you're willing to pay that wee bit extra, wet wall as a splashback in the kitchen or around the shower enclosure or things, is quite a good choice. I keep referring to you, Ken, but I think you just done that in your bathroom, did you not?
Mine's are giant tiles.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I do really like wet wall. I think for a rental property, it's probably the more sensible option, just because it's just a case of putting it up. It's siliconed, it's watertight, and it needs a wipe down. When you've got tiles, like you say, we see them getting cracked just over like wear and tear and usage of them. If the grout starts to go a wee bit, they become a wee bit uneven. Even just properties shifting as well, you get settlement in them, so you can see cracked tiles, and that can end up being quite a big job to replace. You can't just take up one tile and replace it. It tends to be the whole floor that needs done. So, and likewise, if you've got them on the wall as well in a shower enclosure, it means that you're going to have to keep on top of the grout for them, because you don't want water seeping through that and affecting the rest of your property, or if you're in a flat, the property's down below. So wet wall seems to be the more, I would say, sensible option for a rental property, because you just put it up, make sure it's all sealed in properly, keep an eye on the silicone for it, make sure it's watertight still, and that's it basically.
Yeah. Do you know what I think's great? And again, you've just done that. What the panels you've got on your bathroom ceiling, these are brilliant. Especially because in family bathrooms, I mean, the shower, I mean, if there's one bathroom and there's like 4 individuals, they're all going to be in the bathroom in the morning, they're all going to be using the shower and all the rest. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, there should be a fan in there and the window open, but still, there's a lot of usage in there. And we tend to see the bathroom ceiling, it will start to flake, and if it's not ventilated properly and things. But you've got the panels on the ceiling, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice, obviously, for the maintenance side, you don't have that kind of like moldy ceiling and, like you say,
Yeah.
paint flaking as well if it's not being ventilated properly. I do because I know what I'm doing, but yeah, just for the maintenance side, obviously it gives it more of a modern look as well. And in my case, it was great for covering up Artex.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, but yeah, it's just such a nice, clean, finished look, and easy maintained, and reduces that like flaky ceiling look that is just awful in a bathroom. And in family bathrooms, it happens because they are used so much. But yeah, so and then I think finally on that point, storage space. Storage space is just the most important thing, especially for families. And I say that when we're out doing appraisals and things, and if somebody's like, "Oh, there's lots of storage here, and then the parking," and I'm like, "Look, the two main things that we will get asked or people will look for is what's the parking and what's the storage like." Or when we're doing viewings, people will want to see what the storage is like in the property. I mean, it's so important, especially for family units, because I mean, you know, even yourself how much stuff you just accumulate, and if you've got a family, 2 or 3 children, and then you've got obviously the 2 adults as well, you definitely need storage. And do you feel like that's something you get asked a lot, Karen?
It is something I always point out at viewings when I'm going around. I'm like, here's all the storage that you've got, because it is. And even if you're by yourself, you still have so much stuff like a Hoover, like everything. It's amazing the things that you can accumulate that you just need to tuck away somewhere. So storage is always something I would point out. Obviously, in quite a few new builds as well, they tend to struggle a bit for storage. So when you've got like an older property that has great size cupboards, it's like, look at this amazing size cupboard. And it is, it's something that people like because people have a lot of things and
Yeah,
a lot of things that need tucked away.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So allowing families to decorate their children's rooms as well, I think, is an important one. Um, it gives them a real sense of having a long-term home, and that's ultimately what you want from a tenancy. So it's worth being open to suggestions and include any permissions and terms. Set them out at the outset when you first are in the early stages of agreeing the tenancy and things. I mean, we do this quite a lot if we're doing a viewing with people that have got families, and you know, if they've got a wee boy and they want to do the room blue or the wee girl in pink, do you know what I mean? That's just, I know that's kind of stereotypical, but that's just like as example. But we do get that quite a lot, and we try and lay that out beforehand, so we can say to the owner, right, okay, we've got this family, they want to move in. Are they allowed to do the little girl's room like this? Are they allowed to do this in the boys' room, so that they could move in and then just make the property their home, basically. I mean, we always emphasise decorating and things, especially when it's colours, should be done properly by a professional, or somebody who's competent enough, because we don't want paint on light switches and skirtings and all those horror things. But yeah, Karen, I mean, that's something that you'll be familiar with as well.
Yeah, I get asked it a lot at viewings if they're allowed to decorate, and they say usually it's fine. We just ask that you let us know what it is that you're looking to do so we can check it with the landlord. It's best to have it in writing as well, so at the end of the tenancy there's no discrepancies about it. And most of the time it's fine if they put it back to neutral. For example, if they were going for a colour, it's fine, but put it back to neutral before you move out.
Yeah, yeah, and 9 times out of 10 that is the situation, and that's fine as long as you set that all out from the beginning. It should be fine. But I think also, if you are looking to kind of target family units and things, there's other things you can do that might make the property more appealing. I think if people have got young children, putting some sort of like child safety measures in place is quite good. If your buy-to-let is designed for families, like check that the stair banisters are no more than 10 centimetres apart. Jim and I have had that problem years ago. Jim's got quite a lot of properties with external staircases and things, and we've had to make sure that they are obviously within regulations and safe for children and things as well. And the upstairs windows have restrictors to prevent young children obviously pushing them open. I mean, a lot of windows now, I mean, all windows now will have these safety catches where you have to push the button at the side. But yeah, all these wee things that will be appealing to a family unit that's got young children. Your tenants may also wish to install additional child safety measures of their own. So arm yourself with a few options that combine peace of mind for parents with the reduced risk of damage to your property. So I think things like obviously protective wall pads, where baby gates go, we've had that in the past. Do you know when at the entrance door to rooms at the top of stairs, people have put baby gates in, and then when they come out, they leave a wee bit of a mess. I've come across that quite a few times over the years. So to preempt that and say, like, are you going to put a baby gate's going to go in? Can we put pads or protectors where they're going to go so that there's not going to be any damage? And then things like the drill-free catches on kitchen units and things, if you could put them in place, or allow them to put them in place, then because the last thing you want is things drilled into your kitchen cabinets, but you do get all these. I mean, most of them are stick-on now. Any others you could think of, Karen?
I think baby gates is the biggest one. So having some, like you say, some like pads that they can put in place for it. I've seen quite a lot of damage from baby gates over time. So it's making sure that the tenants know how to install them correctly. And if you are a landlord that is accepting small children, that there is going to be the chance that there's going to be baby gates going up. Ideally, tenants should be making good of the marks from them on their vacating, but they don't always. So it's something to keep an eye on as well when you're an agent, to make sure that if you're doing an inspection of the property and you see a baby gate in place, making sure the tenants are fully aware that when they do vacate, they will have to fix the wall that is potentially being screwed into.
Yeah. Also, I think now if you're going to be providing blinds at a window, I mean, a lot of landlords don't and allow people to put their own blinds and curtains up, that's fine. But if you are doing blinds, then a lot of blinds come with the safety measures for the cords. We know obviously these are a potential safety risk for young children. But if you're putting blinds in, they do come with the instructions. They've got these little hooks where you wind it up and keep it out the road. And you can actually shorten them so that they're not longer than they actually need to be. Because you'll know when you buy new blinds and things that they come with such a long cord. But you don't need to have that. You could cut that back, and you could also have it safely tucked away on the hook on the side of the window, so it's out of the children's reach. I mean, that is definitely something I would recommend doing if you're going to be providing blinds, because they are a big safety risk for young children. And I think by offering some of these simple and clever tips, you'll show your tenants that you not only care about the property but also their safety, and it's a great start to building that relationship with tenants. Just from the outset, and you'll know the advantages of having that good relationship from the start, Karen, when you're working with tenants and trying to manage a property. So, and then we will come to pets, and pets without peeves, as this section is called. And many landlords are pet owners, so why would they refuse their tenants to have pets? It's a classic case of maybe like a few rotten apples spoiling the whole barrel. Either way, though, extreme scare stories, as Jim says, obviously you hear all these horror stories in the press from landlords that have had the unfortunate circumstances or personal experiences. And while the security deposit will usually cover the cost of repairs, it doesn't remove the work and disruption involved, which is the real concern for landlords, particularly self-managing landlords. And they will shy away from the confrontation at the end, and it can become a really stressful situation at the end if the property is not being managed properly. There's a lot of damage at the end. They end up not having the right evidence to claim, or they don't get the claim back. Then it can become not only stressful but then quite costly as well. So let's look at some ways that we could create some, like, maybe greater peace of mind before accepting a tenant, and try and discuss like what we do as a checklist as well, Karen, to find the best fit for people's buy-to-let when we are looking for tenants.
So the first thing that you can do is get a CV for any requested pets. So this is including their age, breed, behaviour, training, vaccinations, flea treatment, and length of ownership. These are all small things that you can take into account to make sure that somebody is looking after their pet in the first place. Majority of the time that we see it, it's not always a bad pet, it can be a bad owner. So eliminating as many things as you can at the start of the tenancy is ideally what you need to be doing.
Yeah, I think, I think a lot of, like I said to Jim, and if somebody could demonstrate all these things, it just shows that they are a responsible pet owner. And if people could demonstrate that to me, and like a lot of people do, they'll bring in pictures or they'll bring in their actual pet to show us and things. I mean, that just demonstrates that, look, I'm really serious about my pet and I want to bring the pet with me. And to me, as long as you've got all that in place and checked all that, then it's a good start to a tenancy where I don't think the pet's going to be an issue, as long as you've got a responsible owner.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I had a block of viewings one day, and it was a very high-end property, quite a high-end rent as well. And the people turned up and they were like, "Look, do you mind if we bring our dog in?" And it was this little pug that they carried around during the view. And I was like, "It's fine as long as like you try and keep the dog off the floor because this property's not yours right now." So they carried this little dog around with them the whole time, and it was so good. And they ended up getting the property. They were the best fit for it, and you know what? It's worked out perfectly. They've made it a lovely home for themselves. The dog is just so friendly, doesn't cause any damage. You couldn't even tell that the dog is there, to be honest, until it comes running to the door to see you. So it's good to, when people turn up with their pets for viewing, it's like, well, at least you can kind of see what their pet is like as well to give you a better incline to it, and make sure you're finding the right fit for the property.
Yeah, I think in pet size and breed and things, like you say, it's on an individual basis. It's whether it's right for that property. I mean, if it's just a wee small dog and it's an apartment and it's maybe ground floor or even just first floor, then that might be fine. But if they've got two huskies or whatever, then you're not going to be in a first floor apartment. I mean, so although in a bigger house with a big garden, maybe the two huskies would be fine. I mean, I know obviously people think, God, two huskies, they would panic. We actually have a tenancy that's got more than two huskies and it's been fine for a long time. So yeah, it is definitely on an individual basis. But what else, Karen?
So including pet questions when you write to previous landlords for a reference. So obviously we reference tenants, but it is good to reference their pets as well. So when you are requesting a landlord reference or their current landlord, then include a section with them, their pets. So you are getting that confirmation that yes, they have looked after their pets. Yes, there is no damage to the property. And yes, you would rent to them again.
Yeah, they are all the main questions you would want answers to, definitely. I think a landlord reference without a pet is important anyway, but to get that input about the pet from the previous landlord is really important. So just make sure that the landlord's not is giving you the whole truth and not just passing the ones like, oh, they're great, just to get rid of them. But not that we've had that, I don't think, but just be careful.
No, thankfully not. I was going to have that fear, but thankfully we've not had it yet.
Like you're not just passing people into us because you want rid, but
yeah.
Yeah, no, that doesn't usually happen. And then I think, like you say, meet the pet in person is quite an important one, and people are really willing to do that. For a while now, Karen, we've done pet deposits in addition to the security deposit, and they pay a wee bit extra on things. I mean, how long have you been doing that? Is that something that you found is quite successful?
Yeah, over the last couple of years, it's something that we've really enforced. When somebody has a pet, we take a larger deposit for them. So basically, I'm quite picky when it comes to referencing to make sure we find the right tenant. So these are all little things that you can do to make sure that you are trying to find that right tenant for the property. So we find that people that are quite happy to pay the pet deposit are ones that are like that know they're going to get it back at the end of the tenancy. They know that their pet's not going to cause any damage, so they'll get their money back. People that are not, thankfully I've never actually had it yet, but people that are not happy to pay a pet deposit, they're the ones that I would be concerned about, because obviously it's like, well, do you back your pet's behaviour? Is there going to be any issues that come from this? So it's a good way to even just kind of filter that side of it out, and just somebody that is quite happy to pay it does obviously have a wee bit more faith in their pet's behaviour than somebody that's perhaps not.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like a grossly vast amount more than the actual security deposit. It's just a nominal amount, maybe a few hundred or whatever. I mean, obviously people's affordability and things is different, and we appreciate that. But I think it's just that wee bit extra incentive to reassure us and reassure the landlord and demonstrate from the tenant that they are serious about their pet and they're going to look after it while it's in the property. I think that's the main point of that. But then there is that wee bit extra there if maybe the living room carpet needs a good clean and shampoo at the end. There's that wee bit extra to do a professional clean on the carpets or something. And that's the whole purpose in that. I think it's just to be clear that we're not enforcing some big massive security deposits over and above what they're already paying just because they've got a pet. It is just at that level, and we've done that quite successfully for a long time, and people are quite happy to oblige.
Exactly, like you say, it's just that little bit extra. Just, you know what, if something does need an extra clean at the end of the tenancy, then there is a wee bit more money there. But it's usually, I think, the most we've ever taken is £300 or £400 for a pet deposit, but that was on a big property. It was obviously, so it is very much based on the property and the pets itself. The average for it, I would say, is about an extra £200 for your typical property. But like I say, it is taken on kind of an individual basis for how many pets somebody has, and the size of the property is mostly what it's based on.
Yeah. And also finding out what kind of companionship the pet has, particularly if with dogs and things, and I'm aware of this myself as being a dog owner, because if people are out working all day, what's your dog doing all day? Is there somebody going in and checking it? Does it get walked? Or are they taken out in the morning and had really, like my dog, for instance, I do have periodically people checking on him throughout the day, but he is walked in the morning for a good hour. So he doesn't want to do anything else the rest of the day. He just sleeps, and then he's out again at night. And he's not a dog that chews things or does things. You know what I mean? So that's fine. But you need to make sure if people are going to be out working long hours, are they crate trained? Like obviously in my own circumstances, are they walked properly in the morning before they're left? Do you know what I mean? So is that something that you gauge with people before tenancies, Kim?
Yeah, so we have a few tenants that have dogs, and they actually take them to work, and they make that quite clear when they're going through the referencing process. Look, I have this pet, but it does come to work with me. They're not left in the property by themselves. Obviously, if you've got somebody that's working long hours, I would advise at least having like a dog walker or somebody coming in to check on your pet. Leaving it alone Monday to Friday 9 till 5 is too much for a pet. And then, well, for a dog anyway, obviously cats are different, but when you have a dog, and that's what leads to destruction, they get left, they get distressed or bored, and they start chewing, or you get noise complaints from them howling or barking because they're just missing that company. So making sure that somebody has the right setup in place for their pet to minimise any potential damage from it.
Yeah, and even if like that's a family member nipping in the afternoon, or do you know what I mean? Even if it's just every other day, or just to break up that, just to kind of make it like not so that monotonous long periods of time where you've left within the property is quite important, because that is when damage and even noise complaints, like you say, and things could start to occur. So that is a really important part. But I think remember that most pets are not wild animals. They go a long way to making happy homes, and people treasure their pets, and they really do. And it's important that you allow people to be able to take up a tenancy and bring them with them. But just there's correct ways of doing it, and minimising any of the horror stories that you hear that go with it. I think that's really important to take that into consideration anyway. And then I think finally, I would say, now you mentioned this, Karen, about any agreements. Obviously, having things in writing if you're going to agree things prior to the tenancy starting. Now, we have the private residential tenancy in Scotland, which is the government template. You can add certain bits into that if you like. We sometimes do separate kind of disclaimers as such in agreement, and people sign them, whether it's to do with maybe additional appliances or maybe pets and things as well. Is that something that you do quite often? Is that something that's commonly done?
Yeah, so we have obviously our initial documents that they sign as our terms, and it states on that how many pets, if they're allowed pets in the first instance, and if they do, how many pets that they're allowed. So for example, it'll be like 1 dog, 1 cat, 2 dogs. And that's obviously what they're allowed during their tenancy. You don't want to be moving somebody in and then being like, oh, I'm allowed pets, so, and they end up with like 5 dogs. It's like, no, we've actually had that once before. And he had too many pets, and he was like, I'm allowed pets. And I was like, no, you're not. So we went back, we were able to refer back to his documents and say, look, obviously you are permitted pets, but you're only allowed 2 dogs and a cat at the property. That is your maximum. So it's just kind of managing as well how many pets that they have, and having those documents in place to refer back to if there are any discrepancies about it.
Yeah. I mean, we've always set out terms prior to signing the tenancy agreement, which obviously, like you say, state pets that are going to be in the property, how many pets are actually going to be there, how many people are going to be living in the property, because ultimately if it's a family, it will only be the parents that are co-signing the lease up to a maximum of 2. Obviously any more would kind of go into HMO territory, and then we would then obviously have the occupants, and then list the children and things and people that are going to be living in the property, and that can't change without first coming through your agent or your landlord and getting that authorization for additional members of the family or pets and things to be included. So it's very important to set that out at the outset before you even do the tenancy agreement and things and put things in place. And yeah, make it clear that your buy-to-let will be returned in its original state, with the damage from pets and children repaired and decoration restored. And that is something that we've obviously touched on throughout the show this morning, and it is really important. And I think it's something that you need to reinforce with tenants throughout the tenancy, like points of inspection and things as well is a good thing to keep track of pets. And I hate to keep saying children and speak about class and children and the same the same as pets, but yeah, I think for me the pet thing is quite a big topic, and I know that people listening or watching maybe on the reruns will maybe have experiences or have an opinion about that. And again, like I say, please jump in the comments if it's on the rerun or things, or if you're a landlord and maybe you're having an issue with a tenant that's got pets, or a potential tenant that you want to take on that has pets and don't know how to kind of approach it properly. You could speak to myself, speak to Karen. We deal with day in, day out. It's a day in, day out thing, because as we've just went through all the statistics and figures there is so many people that own pets and want to rent a property, and they are really good, viable tenants. You just need to go through the right procedure. Would you agree with that, Karen?
Yeah, definitely. Just eliminating all the kind of little bits that you can throughout the referencing process, just to make sure that you are doing your due diligence on it to find yourself the right tenant, whether that's somebody that's got children or pets, just to make sure that you're finding the right tenancy regardless. Yeah.
And then obviously in the future, depending on whether the government's existing proposals around tenants with pets becomes law, because obviously that is in the pipeline, and the point where you could say no pets is probably going to be, I think, at the fast in years to come. It may then be the case where you require your tenants to take out a pet insurance policy, as well as, I mean, we obviously look for tenants to take out their own contents insurance and things. So then that might be something of the future as well. So things are always changing. So, I mean, that's a good thing to keep in mind, that if you've got, I mean, obviously we keep track of all these things, Karen, quite predominantly, because things are changing so much. But if you're a self-managed landlord and things, you might not have time to keep track of all these kind of changes to legislation and updates to the law and things. So again, I mean, we're happy to answer any questions if you have them regarding obviously this pending changes around pets, or any other pending changes around the laws for letting and best practices for managing property as well. So Karen, any final thoughts for today?
If you discriminate against pets, you are really narrowing your market. So I would at least take it into consideration and take the necessary steps to make sure you're finding a tenant that is the best fit for your property.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you are going to exclude pets straight off without looking at things on an individual basis, you really narrow your market down, because there's so many applicants we get that have pets. And I think family units are so popular at the moment, and they will and continue to be for the foreseeable. These are two different demographics that you should really keep in mind when considering tenants. But I think most importantly for me, which I took from today, is that the initial stages of the whole letting procedure need to be done correctly, whether that involves family with children, family with children and pets, or just somebody with pets. They are all really good tenants. It just needs to be done in the correct process at the beginning to find the right people for the right property. Like you say, Karen, consider everybody on an individual basis and do the proper checks. Do your due diligence on each individual situation, and it sets out a good start to a really successful tenancy and a long-term tenancy, which everybody, if you're an investor, landlord, or an agent like us, is what we want ultimately from the outset. And that's really it from me this morning, Karen. thank you so much for joining me, and thanks to Jim for knitting in from London. I hope he has a really good time. And thanks everybody for listening. Again, there will be reruns, so jump in the comments or message myself or Karen direct if you want to talk about anything that we covered today. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining me, Karen.
You're welcome.
Right, see you later, guys.